Indiana Jones and the Zealandian Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Prologue. The Area 52 incident. Area 52, or Fort Jefferson, Nevada, March 18th, 1957, noon. The, the Nevada desert stretched out in a vast, arid expanse northeast of the heart of Las Vegas. The terrain was a flat, unforgiving landscape, painted in a muted palette of gray, olive, and brown by low-lying shrubbery. Um, in the far distance, massive ranges of mountainous desert highlands rose like jagged walls, enclosing the land on three sides. This was a wilderness of Joshua trees, Utah junipers, and pinyon pines, where desert's globe mallow, brittle and desert marigold bloomed among various cacti. Human civilization was nowhere to be found, save for the wide, smoothly paved concrete roads that sliced through the countryside. It was high noon. The sun hung in a cloudless sky, beaten down with a punishing humidity-free heat. The silence was absolute, until a prairie dog popped its upper half from its burrow. It sniffed the air, sensing a rapidly approaching mechanical rhythm. The noise was industrial and sleek, intensifying until the ground began to vibrate. To the creature's right, a grayish dark green blur materialized. As the industrial roar peaked, the prairie dog gasped and retreated into its colony system, just as a convoy of four heavy military trucks thundered past, tires screaming against the hot asphalt. The vehicles turned right, arriving at the main perimeter of Gate C. The facility was a fortress, heavy steel fencing topped with barbed wire, watchtowers, and a labyrinth of barricades, including wedge barriers with anti-vehicle obstacles, sandbags, and Hesco bastion walls. The not checkpoints, sorry. The checkpoint featured concrete bollards, guard shacks, and retractable barriers. The convoy hissed to a stop, and from the passenger seat of the lead truck, a tall, bald man in his late 40s with a scarred, chiseled jawline stepped out. He exchanged stiff salutes with the military police officers present. "Sorry, gentlemen," the MP officer stated flatly. "Fort Jefferson is closed to all on-site personnel and visitors without specific authorization. That goes for you too, Colonel. The Pentagon has ordered Fort Jefferson shut for high yields military weapons testing for the next 24 hours. You gentlemen can turn these rigs around and take the day off." Colonel then suddenly stepped aside. Suddenly, his quote-unquote U.S. soldiers leveled assault rifles and opened fire, annihilating the MPs in seconds before they could draw their sidearms. The colonel was actually Soviet Army Colonel Ivan Petrov, leading the platoon of disguised Russians. Petrov smirked. "Good job, gentlemen. Good job. We just breached Gate C. Now let's enter the facility at Hangar A. Hangar A is the warehouse district just beyond Gate C." A soldier tossed a dead MP aside, pulled a red lever to raise the boom arm, and shouted, "We're ready to enter the facility." Petrov boarded his truck, commanding, "Wonderful work, gentlemen. We need to get to Hangar A. Let's move, move, move." The trucks roared past, the waving 50 star American flag, into Hangar A, a grid of sorry. A grid of identical rectangular warehouses clad in corrugated metal. As the vehicles parked, soldiers hauled out two prisoners. First was George MacHale, a 60-year-old former MI6 agent and British Marine veteran, historical museum scholar, and former MI6 agent and British Marine veteran, historical museum scholar, and archaeologist in a crimson shirt and black suit jacket. Mac was a stout mustached man with combed black hair to the right, as well as dark gray pants and formal leather shoes. Then a soldier threw a worn leather fedora to the ground and dragged out none other than Indiana Jones, who was age 58. Indiana Jones had khaki-colored pants, black polished shoes, a leather jacket, a white long-sleeved formal shirt, his signature worn fedora hat, alongside his leather holster of a machete, a crowbar, a flashlight, a bullwhip, two Browning high-power pistols, a Smith & Wesson 1917 revolver, and a Webley .45 caliber revolver, all loaded alongside countless backup magazines and revolver cylinders. Indy had pale Asian brown and relatively short hair, and his face was slightly bearded and somewhat aged. Soviets. I hate these guys. Indy muttered. I and the rifles. This isn't so bad. We face worse, though. Oh, really? Like when? Mac asked skeptically. Flansenberg, Denmark, 1942. Indy replied. Twice as many Nazis. Mac gave a dry chuckle. Well, we were younger then, and armed. Right now, we're completely defenseless. A military jeep then screeched to a halt, and out stepped Colonel Ekaterina Ivanov, a 39-year-old Ukrainian-born KGB officer, standing tall and muscular, the psychic combatant, military commander, and champion fencer locked eyes with Indy. Petrov grabbed a rugged canvas backpack from the truck, his face contorted with disdain. From what we can tell, they were digging up junk in that god-forsaken Guatemalan hellhole. They were at some kind of coastal mine ruins, looking for a temple with a stone calendar. He upended the bag, dumping pottery shards, a mine fertility idol, and a carved granite. Sorry, I missed the part. Sorry. He upended the bag, dumping pottery shards, a mine fertility idol, and a carved granite stone of special glyphs into the dirt. Ivanov stepped forward and crushed the artifacts under her heavy boots. We were going to study those, Indy snapped. Ivanov brushed her hands together dismissively. There's something of far greater importance than those coastal Mayan ruins that we are currently seeking here at Area 52, Dr. Jones. 10 years ago, in Tanis, Egypt, you excavated the sarcophagus of an Egyptian princess. You reported strange events, like objects moving, lights flickering in empty buildings, and auditory hallucinations. The CIA intervened and brought that sarcophagus here for quote unquote top secret research. You will help us recover it, and we will let you go. Indy scuffed. That was 1947. I just spent 2 years in the American-occupied sector of Germany, helping rebuild. After the Tanis cover-up, the feds vanished with the box. They never let me inside the gates. You've brought me to a place I don't even recognize. In the so-called strange events, that was malaria and yellow fever, not ghosts. Despite his protests, they entered the cavernous warehouse. Indy gasped, realizing how to find the needle in the haystack. I need gunpowder from your firearms and hand grenades. And why so? Well, sorry. I missed the part, sorry. I needs gunpowder from your firearms and hand grenades. And why so? Ivanov demanded. The sarcophagus is attracted to smaller metallic objects, Indy explained. It had a magnetic pulse. It could very well still be magnetic. The Soviet soldiers uncocked and unloaded their rifles and magazines and poured internal gunpowder into Indy's palms. Indy walked forwards, throwing the powder high into the air. Initially, it drifted down, but suddenly, the piles began shifting firmly to the right, as if being pulled towards a literal unseen force. Good, it's still picking up magnetism. I think I found it, just 2 columns away, Petrov commanded. Gentlemen, we found the artifact. Let's move. 2 columns over, Indy threw more powder. Instead of falling, it slammed against the long, rectangular dark green crates, stamped with the U.S. National Guard logo. Soldiers used crowbars to pry open the lid, revealing a large rectangular nest coffin made of andesite and granite stone. There it is, Indy told Mac. The tomb of the princess from the 4th Dynasty era, from the reign of Pharaoh Sennacherib, the founding pharaoh who perfected pyramid construction. The soldiers shoved the stone lid aside with a heavy thud, revealing a smaller second coffin of sycamore and cedar, gilded with gold and silver and covered in colorful protective spells. They pulled off the inner lid and pulled out the primary sarcophagus. It was a peculiar anthropoid or humanoid shape, resembling the princess, covered in paintings from the Book of the Dead, in vibrant black, golden yellow, and white gilding with platinum and rubies. The stylized, slender face of the princess stared back, her carved arms holding a flail and a sickle. At the bottom, the name Hatshepsut was distinctly etched in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. The Soviet soldiers carefully removed the heavy lid, revealing the mummified remains of Princess Hatshepsut. She had been tall and slender, likely only 21 at the time of her death. Her face now shielded by a bronze silvery funerary mask. The informative lecture was cut short by the cold clack of a rifle bolt. Indy turned to find Mac standing shoulder to shoulder with a Soviet gunner, his weapon leveled at Indy's chest. "You're a Soviet agent?" Indy asked, his voice thick with disbelief. "A British Marine, an MI6 agent, and you're a collaborator?" Mac chuckled dryly. "Double agent, actually. While I was leaking info on the Reds, I was on their payroll the whole time." Ivanov stepped forward, dismissive. "We don't need a history lesson, Dr. Jones. We are here for the princess's connection to the interdimensional and the Platonic." "I like Ike," Indy muttered. With a lightning-fast crack of his whip, Indy lashed the Soviet soldier's arms, ripping the light machine gun from his grip. He snatched the weapon from the air, holstered his whip, and put a round through the soldier's head before the man could blink. "Unless someone wants to get hurt, run!" Indy roared, unleashing a relentless spray of lead right behind Mac as he ran for safety. Mac jolted, firing a few panic rounds over his shoulder as he fled into the labyrinth of crates. Ivanov fired 3 precise shots from her service pistol before ducking away. while Petrov and his men scrambled onto the truck, hastily throwing the sarcophagus into the back. Move, move, move! Petrov screamed. As the truck roared toward the warehouse exit, Indy fired a final, defiant volley into the air. As they disappeared, then strapped the machine gun. As they disappeared, Indy then strapped the machine gun to his shoulder and sprinted towards the far end of the aisle. I have to get out of here, he growled, already looking for his next exit. Indy noticed a stack of crates that seemed to be in a neatly stacked order, and the shelves of military crates seemed neatly stacked, enough for someone to climb. Indy ran forwards, before proceeding to jump upon and climb upon the crates, until he reached the top of the crates. Indy noticed two more of the military trucks speeding past the aisle, patrolling the warehouse to confront Indy. Thankfully, none of the Soviet troops ever noticed Indiana. Indy pulled out his whip. He firmly slammed it against the surface of the crates he was standing on. He then proceeded to lasso the whip around the air several times before hurling it towards the ceiling crossbeams. Once Indy saw the whip attaching itself to the crossbeam, the archaeologist then slid across the air. Indiana pulled himself forward, causing the whip to slide off in seconds from the ceiling, forwards onto the front army truck. Indiana glided downwards through the air. Indiana, after falling through the air, smashed through the front truck ceiling, landing on the truck between the two soldiers. Indy said to himself, "Perfect landing," before proceeding to aggressively grab and literally throw the soldier in the driver's seat onto the ground. Indy then similarly grabbed and violently shoved the soldier in the front seats from the moving vehicle onto the ground. And he then noticed gunfire raining past from behind. Indiana turned around, and he saw the convoy truck behind him. The two soldiers in the front seats were holding submachine guns, while 6 more soldiers were clutching onto the roof of the back truck, firing their assault rifles at the front vehicle. Indy simply lowered the driver's side window, and he grabbed his driver's hand's window, and he pulled out his Webley revolver. Indiana fired 2 shots at the EVAP charcoal canister under the truck, causing the canister to burst, leaking out water vapors and spilling out gasoline onto the floor as the truck moved relentlessly forwards. Indiana then proceeded to fire a single bullet round at the right front tire. This caused the truck to lose control and swirl aggressively. The driver attempted to stir and pull on the brakes, and the soldiers who were in the back of the truck grabbed onto the truck's roof and tightly. The soldier driving tried to slow down the vehicle, but it was too late. The truck rammed to the front, aggressively toppling over, sending 2 of the soldiers ricocheting from the truck's roof. Indiana even noticed one of the soldiers accidentally firing his assault rifle in the air while being thrown. Moments later, the truck aggressively exploded into a furious fireball. Indy watched as he saw engine components, wiring, crossbeams, and industrial devices flying everywhere. The man even saw one of the vehicle's tires, now charred and violently rolling across the aisle before crashing into a stack of crates. Indy said to himself blatantly, "That's going to leave a mark for sure. That's going to leave a mark for sure." Indy then chuckled and remarked to himself, "Well, fantastic, Indy. Fantastic." Indy then reminded himself, "Albeit, jokes aside, I have to report this to the National Guard and the CIA. They'll take care of the rest of the problem. But for now, I just need to focus on escaping from Area 52. The military truck relentlessly sped through the aisles of the warehouse, driving straight. After a while, Indy made a sharp turn around the corner before disappearing out of sight. Meanwhile, there lays a badly damaged military vault, which had the federal seal, the American flag, and the U.S. National Guard plastered on it. In the vault, there were padded blankets and bubble wrapping surrounding a contrasting, colorful, ancient, and rather exotic headdress. The headdress was a semicircular fan-like shape and produced of pure gold, gilded with emeralds, rubies, platinum, silver, and various gemstones, and precious metals. The headdress was supported by deerskin, plant fibers, and bamboo, and had countless feathers of quetzal birds and various tropical birds in southern Mexico and northern Central America. On the front of the headdress was a sun and a waxing crescent moon. The headdress itself was simply too large for anyone to wear, and had special ancient Mayan hieroglyphics adorning it. The headdress was none other than the golden crown of the Omega, an ancient Mayan sacred theocratic covenant to the Mayan goddess Exchel. The crown had a quiet yet awe-striking and intimidating presence, almost like an angelic chorus. Indy's newest adventure had just begun, where his 1936 adventure had ended. Chapter 1: The Return to Marshall College. 1 week after Area 52, Marshall College, Bedford, New York, March 25th, 1957, mid-morning. Indy's classroom featured rows of tired seating and formal school desks. The walls were dark gray, and there were various large bookshelves. There was also a large minimalistic chalkboard in the front of the class. The classrooms also had free globes, various geography posters, a handful of motivational posters, as well as a trash can and recycling bin in the front of the class. Indiana's classroom had the American flag, as well as the flag of the state of New York. There was also a map of Marshall College, alongside a few geographical detailed world maps of different types. Indy's desk was towards the front of the class and had a lamp, a landline telephone, a stapler, office tape, and a couple of pencils, erasers, highlighters, glue pens, and tape erasers. Indy's desk was also metallic, and its surface was made of birch wood, and it had a computer setup. There was also various pre-modern, ancient, and classical artifacts on Indiana's desk. Indy was clean-shaven and had neatly formal hair, and was wearing a white formal business shirt, a red tie, and a light gray jacket. He was also wearing dark brown formal pants alongside his newly polished black formal shoes. Indiana was also a pre-Columbian professor at Marshall College, and had only been a week since his return from Nevada. Indy introduced to his first-hour class. "Good morning, class. I am sorry for my long-term absence. I was hosting an archaeological expedition beginning on January 28th, right after midterms, at a series of coastal Mayan ruins in Guatemala. It was a classical era city of stone houses and stepped pyramids with a central temple. Now, I had just returned from yet another, although a much more minor, trip and detour, shall we say, in Nevada, just last week. I hope you did good with the month-long substitute professor, Mr. Johnson, until my return. And as a matter of fact, Mr. Johnson reported that all classes had good reports over the past 7 weeks. I was gone while in Guatemala and Nevada since shortly after midterms." Indy cleared his voice and began. Today, we'll be continuing on ancient Greek history from the Minoans and the Mycenaeans up till the death of Alexander the Great. Today, we'll be continuing to learn on classical Greek history and in ancient Greek philosophy, particularly from the famous philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And he began lecturing. Socrates, 466 BCE to 399 BCE, was a prominent Athenian Greek philosopher who questions everything and everyone. Plato was from the ancient Greek city-state of Athens, and perhaps was the first Western moral philosopher and a major inspiration for his student, Plato, who largely founded the tradition of Western philosophy. An enigmatic figure, Socrates offered no texts and is known mainly through the posthumous accounts of classical writers, particularly his students Plato and Xenophon. Not xenophobe or xenophobia, Xenophon. These accounts are written as dialogues in which Socrates and his interlocutors examine a subject in the style of question and answer. They gave rise to the Socratic dialogue literary genre. Socrates was a polarizing figure in Athenian history, as he was known for his humility, often claiming the only thing he knew was that he knew nothing, prioritizing the pursuit of wisdom over claiming to possess it. In 399 BCE, he was accused of impiety, not believing in the city's gods, and quote, corrupting the youth of Athens, largely due to his public criticism of Athenian leaders. He was sentenced to death by drinking poison hemlock, which he accepted calmly to stand by his principles. And he stated, Socrates was born to a sculptor and a stonemaker named, oh God, how do you say that? Sophroniscus. Wait, Sophroniscus. No, wait, Sophroniscus. Sophroniscus, yeah. And the midwife named Paeanareta. Paeanareta. I don't know how do you say that. If you guys know how to say that, please let me know in the comment section down below. Socrates also fought in the Peloponnesian War, 431 BCE to 401 BCE, as an Athenian hoplite, foot soldier, fighting in major battles particularly at Puteadia, Delium, and Amphipolis. I don't know how to say it, though. I don't know how to say that either. He served with distinction, famously saving the life of a noblewoman named Alcibiades while navigating the intense political and cultural decay of Athens, which ultimately influenced his philosophical mission. Socrates was known for his simple lifestyle and married a noblewoman named Xanthippe and had 3 children. Along with his teacher, Along with his teacher Socrates and his student Aristotle, Plato is a central figure in the Socrates. Sorry, guys. Socrates, along with his along with his student Aristotle. I made a typo. Sorry. Along with his student Aristotle, Socrates is a central figure in the history of Western philosophy. Well, hold on. Wait, no, 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 not Aristotle, Plato. I'm so sorry about that, guys. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Let's start over that part. Along with his student Plato, Socrates is a central figure in the history of Western philosophy. Plato's complete works are believed to have survived for over 2,000 years. Wait, Socrates's. Wait, hold. Was it Socrates? Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. Let's just say Socrates. Socrates's. Oh, wait, yeah, it's Socrates. I'm really sorry about that, guys. I'm really sorry. Which Socrates' complete works are believed to have survived for over 2,400 years, which brings us to Plato himself. In the pause before continuing to explain, Plato, 428 BCE to 347 BCE, was an ancient Greek philosopher from the city-state of Athens. He is considered to be most commonly the foundational thinker for the Western philosophical tradition. Now, Plato was an inventor of the literary dialogue and dialectic forms. He influenced all the major areas of theoretical philosophy and practical philosophy, and was the founder of the Academy, a philosophical school in Athens where Plato taught the collection of philosophical theories that would later become known as Platonism. The most famous invention of Plato was his theory of forms, or ideas, which aimed to solve what is now known as the problem of universals. He was influenced by the pre-Socratic thinkers like the Ionian Greek philosopher and polymath Pythagoras, the Greek philosopher Heraclides from Ephesus, and Parmenides from Magna Graecia, southern Italy, although much of what is known about them is actually derived from Plato himself. And he continued, along with his teacher Socrates and his student Aristotle, Plato is a central figure in the history of Western philosophy. Plato's complete works are believed to have survived for over 2,400 years, unlike that of nearly all of his contemporaries. Although their popularity has fluctuated, they have consistently been read and studied through the ages. Through Platonism's outgrowth, Neoplatonism, also called Later Platonism, which was a variation of Platonic philosophy, emerged from the 3rd century CE with Hellenistic influences. He also influenced Christian philosophy and both Jewish and Islamic philosophy. Plato himself was born in 428 into an aristocratic and influential Athenian family. Through his mother, Parasition, he was a descendant of Solon, a statesman credited with laying the foundations of Athenian democracy. 3rd century CE historian Diogenes Laertius asserts that Plato is a nickname that alludes to his robust figure. Laertius, that his birth name was Aristocles, meaning best reputation. But this is widely regarded as false by modern scholars. In the end, a pause before stating. Now, Plato himself influenced the ancient Greek philosopher and polymath from Athens named Aristotle. Plato influenced Aristotle primarily through 20 years of mentorship at the Academy, providing the foundational framework for Aristotle's metaphysics, ethics, and epistemology. Not Epstein, epistemology. I just have to clarify that. Epistemiology, not Epstein. Okay, back on topic. While Aristotle developed into an empiricist, focusing on the physical world. I'm sorry. What is this? Can't. Oh, I'm sorry about that, guys. I'm sorry. And empiricists focused on the physical world, he directly responded to, modified, and often argued with Plato's idealist theory of reforms. That brings us to Aristotle, class. Indiana paused and paced before explaining. Aristotle, formally, or by his formal name, Aristoteles, 388 BCE to 322 BCE, was an ancient Greek philosopher and polymath. The writings of Aristotle cover a broad range of subjects, spanning the natural sciences, the philosophy, linguistics, economics, politics, psychology, and the arts. As a founder of the Peripatetic school of philosophy in the Lyceum in Athens, he began the wider Aristotelianism tradition that followed, which set the groundwork for the development of modern science. Little is actually known about Aristotle's life. However, he was born in the city of Starigita in northern Greece during the classical period. His father, a doctor named Nicomachus, died when Aristotle was a young child, and he was brought up by a guardian. At around 18 years old, he joined Plato's Academy in Athens and remained there until the age of 37, around 347 BCE. Shortly after Plato died, Aristotle left Athens, and at the requests of King Philip II of Macedon, tutored his son, Alexander III of Macedon, or better known as Alexander the Great, beginning in 343 BCE. He began the library in the Lyceum, which helped him to produce many of hundreds upon hundreds of books and papyrus scrolls. Despite that, Aristotle wrote treatises and dialogues for publication. However, only around a third of his original output has survived, called Corpus Aristotelicum. Corpus Aristotelicum. None of it intended for publication. Most of the philosopher's works are considered partially or completely lost to time as of now. Aristotle has also provided a complex synthesis of the various philosophies existing prior to him. His teachings and methods of inquiry have had a significant impact across the world and remain a subject of contemporary philosophical discussion. Indy stated, very similar to his two predecessors, Socrates and Aristotle, Aristotle's views and teachings shaped medieval scholarship. He influenced Judeo-Islamic philosophies during the Middle Ages, as well as Judeo-Christian philosophy, especially the Neoplatonism of the early church and the scholastic tradition of the Catholic Church. Aristotle's views profoundly shaped medieval scholarship. The influence of his physical science extended from late antiquity and the early Middle Ages into the European Renaissance, and was not replaced systematically until the Age of Enlightenment, and theories such as classical mechanics were developed. Suddenly, the class bell rang, and the students began to pack their things up to go to their second hour. And you reminded, oh, by the way, there's no homework you need to do. Have a good day, everybody. Chapter 2: The Lost Kingdom of Atlantis. Marshall College, Bedford, New York, March 26, 1957. Early afternoon. It was the 7th-hour class, which was Indy's last class of the day. Indy was continuing where yesterday's classes left off, as he began teaching on Atlantis. Indiana began. Atlantis is a fictional, subterranean, underwater advanced civilization mentioned in Plato's dialogues, Timaeus, and Critias, written around 360 BCE and 357 BCE. Atlantis was an advanced maritime empire and an ancient, sophisticated, complex island society that existed beyond the Pillars of Hercules, Strait of Gibraltar, in the Atlantic Ocean. Atlantis was as large as ancient Libya and Asia Minor, Turkey, combined, and it was a power of sustained prosperity, prosperous stability, hegemonic power, regional expansion, and sustained bureaucratized complexity as a naval dominant empire. Indiana stated, the island was bequeathed to the Greek god of the seas, water, storms, earthquakes, and horses, Poseidon, who fell in love from mortal woman, Silito, and secured her on a central mountain, surrounding it with alternating 10 concentric rings of sea and land to protect her with the land as his fiefdom. The capital featured grand palaces of shining stone, copper bridges, and temples covered in gold, silver, and orichalicum. It was structured with canals, navigable tunnels, and a massive central temple dedicated to Poseidon. The island was exceptionally fertile, boasting natural abundance, advanced mining of materials like orichalisum, and a thriving, energetic, and crowded labor. Initially, the Atlanteans were virtuous, wise, and lived in harmony with their divine nature. Over generations, the divine nature of the Atlanteans became diluted by human nature. They grew corrupt, greedy, and arrogant. The empire became a tyrannical, warlike power, planning to conquer Africa and Europe, subjugating, colonizing, and conquering nations. Colonizing, enslaving, and conquering nations under their direct control. Their vanity, material obsession, and failed. Hold on, wait. Oh, sorry about that, guys. There's something on the laptop. Wait, hold on. Hold on, guys. Yeah, it's just a piece of hair. Sorry about that. Conquering nations under their direct control. Their vanity, material obsession, and failed attempts to conquer the Mediterranean led by the Greek god of thunder, Zeus, to decide on their destruction. In a single violent day and night, Atlantis was destroyed by earthquakes, volcanic activity, and massive floods. By the Greek gods sinking the kingdom beneath the ocean to become a sea of impassable mud. Indy stated, Plato supposedly heard the story of Atlantis from his ancestor Solon, 630 BCE to 560 BCE, who heard it on a business trip to Egypt during the 26th dynasty or Said dynasty around 600 BCE to 590 BCE, roughly, with two priests identified as Sanchez of Sais and Pisinophus of Heliopolis, who reportedly translated the history from old Egyptian pillars millennia prior. The priests claimed Atlantis sank 9,000 years before their time, roughly 9,600 BCE, as stated before. Indy briefly said for background context. As for Solon, 630 BCE to 560 BCE, he was an archaic Greek Athenian philosopher, statesman, lawmaker, and poet, and one of the seven sages of Greece, and is credited with laying the foundations for Athenian democracy. Solon's efforts to legislate against political, economic, and moral decline resulted in his constitutional reform, overturning most of Draco's laws. Indy stated, Solon told the story to Doroipidus, who passed it to his son, Creatius the Elder, who then told his grandson, Creatius the Younger, who then told Plato. Who was his grandson. Indiana began. The origin of the original ancient Greek story of Atlantis likely never existed, serving instead as a fictional allegory by Plato around 360 BCE to illustrate political theories such as the dangers of imperialism and greed, with no external historical records, geological evidence, or archaeological traces existent. Indy chuckled and remarked, funnily enough, Aristotle, who was Plato's student, reportedly believed that Plato invented the story from Aristotle's own witness. Indy cleared his throat and stated, Plato stated, Atlantis existed 9,000 years before his time, roughly 11,600 years ago. A period where human civilization was in the Neolithic period and incapable of building an advanced massive empire. The entire story of Atlantis came from Plato himself and not from any ancient Egyptian records, which Plato claimed as his source, contain zero mention of this island. Similarly, there is no pre-Platonic Greek literature mentioned in Atlantis. Plato also described it as larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. It had vanished without a trace, leaving only impassable mud. No such submerged landmass of such size ever existed in that area of the Atlantic Ocean due to heavy geographical impossibilities. And despite intense oceanographic research, no archaeological evidence, genetic links, or physical traces of a huge and advanced civilization have been found where where Plato described, Modern oceanography and plate tectonics show that no such continent could have existed and then sunk in the Atlantic Ocean, and the seafloor has spread over millions of years, not contracted. In fact, Plato described Atlantis with Bronze-aged features, like the wall around the Acropolis, and specific temples that did not exist during the 9,600 BCE timeframe that he provided. Since Atlantis occurred in the Neolithic period, it would be implausible for Bronze Age era features to exist at this time. This is because humans were changing from a hunter-gatherer society lifestyle to one of settlement. Indiana paused and paced for a bit before stating, "Now, Atlantis was meant to represent a purely fictional creation rather than a historical lost reality. Atlantis was meant to be an allegory describing the dangers of imperialistic hubris and moral decay. It served as a cautionary parable, contrasting decadence, dissident, greedy, and technologically advanced superpower with an ideal, virtuous Athens, ultimately demonstrating the downfall of power when it's with its wait, hold on. The downfall of power when it disregards divine and ethical principles. Indiana explained in more detail. Plato intended Atlantis to be a contrast of political ideas, as the sunken kingdom represented a technologically advanced, wealthy, and powerful society that became corrupt, arrogant, greedy, and arrogant. Hubris, as punishment for their imperialistic, unethical, and lack of respect for the gods. The civilization is destroyed and sunk into the ocean. Many scholars believe that Plato was offering a critique of his own city, Athens, which had recently lost the Peloponnesian War to Sparta after attempting to build a maritime empire. The story serves as a reminder that nations that lose their moral compass will inevitably face destruction. Plato often used myths to communicate complex ideas. Atlantis functions as a philosophical myth or thought experiment designed to test his ideas about the perfect state, the quote, perfect state, outlined in his work, The Republic, in a realistic, conflict oriented scenario. Jones explained. Plato often used myths to communicate complex ideas. Atlantis functions as a philosophical myth. Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, shit, I said that already. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Indiana said, overall, Atlantis was intended to represent philosophical, metaphorical, symbolic, and allegorical themes that represent the dangers of hubris, excessive pride, unchecked imperialism, and the corruption of a society that abandons moral virtue for material wealth. It served as a cautionary tale explaining hubris and moral downfall, idealism versus materialism, divine versus human nature, and the contrast to a so called perfect state. Chapter 3 Indiana's Predicament. While early readers, including Plato's own student, Aristotle, generally interpreted the story as a grand philosophical invention, the notion of Atlantis as a sunken continent gained a feverish, almost cult-like popularity in the 19th century and the early 20th century. There are still no, wait. There are still pseudoscientific and pseudo-archaeological searches for Atlantis. Wait, hold on. Sorry. Pseudo scientific and pseudo-archaeological searches for Atlantis still continue, often fueled by media, social media, and alternative history narratives, despite a total lack of supporting archaeological evidence, which still sometimes happens to this very day among the pseudo-scientific and pseudo-archaeological communities. Indy leaned against his desk, tapping the piece of chalk against his palm. However, modern scholars and classicists agree almost unanimously Atlantis is a fictional allegorical creation, a morality tale about the hubris of nations. The seventh hour bell echoed through the hall. That's it for today. Have a good rest of your day, everyone. No formal homework for the week, but if you have a spare hour tomorrow, I strongly suggest you crack your tests. No, wait, your texts, not tests. Texts to the Peloponnesian War. We'll be diving deep on Monday. He raised his voice over the shuffle in the bags. I'll be in my office for the next hour if anyone needs clarification. As the last student filtered out, the heavy oak door didn't click shut. Instead, it swung wide to reveal a figure that made Indy's stomach drop. Charles Stanforth, the Dean of Students, stood in the threshold. At 64, Stanforth was a man of immense dignity, a London-born scholar and museum curator who usually wore his authority with gentle grace. Today, however, his dark brown suit looked heavy on his shoulders. He adjusted his glasses, his balding head catching the dim afternoon light, and stepped into the room. Dr. Jones, Stanford began, his British accent clipped and somber. May I have a word? Indy straightened his tie, sensing the shift in the room's pressure. Why, yes, of course, Charles. What's on your mind? Stanford closed the door firmly behind him. He didn't sit. Did you, or did you not, have a run-in with the Soviet Spetsnaz while you were in Nevada last week? Indy froze his eyes, widening in a mixture of shock and genuine confusion. How would you know that? Oh? Stanford let out a short, hysterical bark laugh. Ha! Ha! The college administration informed me that your college was ransacked by the FBI on Tuesday at noon. Henry. Wait, sorry. The college administration informed me that your office was ransacked by the FBI on Tuesday at noon, Henry. They didn't just barge in recklessly. They had federal search warrants signed by a judge. They went through every drawer, every grading book, every personal letter. Indy stepped around his desk, his voice rising. And the Boreal told the college... Wait, hold on. Sorry. Indy stepped around his desk, his voice rising. And the Boreal told the college about my confrontation with the Soviets? Oh, sorry. And wait, sorry. That was a bad tone. Let me try that again. And the Boreal told the college about my confrontation with the Soviets? Don't act as if you're in the dark. That's exactly what happened, Stanforth cried, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and frustration. The Board of Regents, with the information provided by the FBI, believed you are a Soviet sympathizer. The official line is that you were seen assisting them in the location and the extraction of mummified remains from Egyptian sites now stored at Fort Jefferson, a secure Army and Air Force base. Charles, listen to me. Indy shot back, his hands gesturing empathetically. I was in Guatemala for 7 weeks. I was prepared to head home relatively soon when I was abducted, dragged across the border. I didn't assist them. I was forced at gunpoint to help them navigate that hangar. And I was damn lucky to escape with my skin intact. Sanford paced the front of the room, his polished shoes clicking sharply. It doesn't matter what the truth is in a room full of politicians, Henry. You were nearly fired on the spot by the board. Do you have any idea how close you came to the breadline? Wait, Indy asked, his head spinning. When did this all happen? The moment you stepped foot back in New York, the investigation was humming along while you were still shaking the desert sand out of your boots. Indy leans back against his chalkboard. A cold realization drawn on him. Let me guess. The Red Scare. McCarthy's ghost is still haunting the halls of Marshall. Stanford sighed, the fire leaving him as he slumped slightly. He lowered his voice to a wary academic tone, calm. Yes, Jones. Exactly. The climate in this country. It's paranoid. Toxic as of now. He took a breath, trying to find the silver lining. The good news is that you haven't been fired. The FBI conducted their first sweep and found no evidence of pro-communist labor activity. No financial contributions, no secret manifestos, no organizational affiliations. Your files are clean, Henry. Stanford paused, looking out the window at the quiet campus. However, I managed to negotiate a concession to keep the board from terminating you. I agreed that you would be placed on indefinite leave with pay, starting today. He turned back to Indy, his expression solemn. But that concession came with a price. I have to tender my own resignation. Indy's head tilted in disbelief. The air felt thin. Wait, you're resigning, Charles? You are this college. I'm afraid so, Stanford replied softly. My final day is this Friday. No, hold on. Indy's voice was frantic now. What if we resolve this before Thursday? Can you overturn a willing resignation? If I talk to the Boreal, if I explain... Henry, look at the world around us. Stanford interrupted gently. The FBI is moving into a second phase of their investigation. They aren't going to wrap this up by this week, just because we ask nicely. Perhaps once the storm blows over, I might be able to return to Marshall, but for now, I have to fall on my own sword to keep you on the payroll. Indy began to pace, his breath hitching as the weight of the situation crashed down. The man who had faced rolling boulders in the Imperial Japanese felt trapped by a few sheets of paper. This can't happen, Charles. This can't happen. Charles, this is insane. What do I do? What do I... Henry, calm down. Stanford stepped forward, placing a steadying hand on Indy's shoulder. Indy stopped, taking a few steps forward, placing a steadying hand on Indy's shoulder. Indy stopped, taking a few ragged deep breaths, forcing his heart rate to slow. He looked at his friend, feeling a profound sense of guilt. Stanford gave him a small, tired smile. It really could have been worse, my friend. Much worse. I promise you. Everything is going to be okay. You will return to this classroom soon. The truth has a way of surfacing eventually. For now, take the leave. Take the leave. Lay low. And anything may go in these times, but we will weather it. Indy looked at the empty seats of his classroom, the shadows growing long across the desks. For the first time in his life, he didn't have a map for his journey ahead. I think we'll do just one last chapter. Chapter 4, Jimena. After around 15 minutes, Indy was walking the sidewalks along Marshall College, and he stepped out into the crisp, biting air of the New York afternoon, his leather satchel heavy against his hip as he navigated the winding stone sidewalks of Marshall College. The Gothic architecture of the campus... Hold on. The Gothic and Georgian architecture of the campus, usually a source of comfort. Hold on. Gothic. Wait, hold on. Gothic, neo-colonial, Let me start over. The Gothic, neo-colonial, neoclassical, and Georgian architecture at the campus, usually a source of comfort, now felt like it was watching with a cold, judgmental eye. He reached his parked car, a black 1946 Ford Super Deluxe. He fumbled with his keys. The metal bit into his palm in the chilly breeze, sliding into the worn bench seat. He cranked the engine, which sputtered to life with a familiar throaty growl. Even though it was late March and the air still held a winter stench, it was relatively warm. It was rather warm today. Indy reached for the window crank, rolling it down halfway to let the fresh air flush out the suffocating tension of the lecture air. With a sharp shift into the gear, he pulled away from the curb, and tires crunching over the gravel as he left his quiet prestige of the college behind, heading toward the unknown of his forced vacation. Well, hold on, guys. Excuse me. Hold on. um. Well, hold on, guys. Just give me a moment, really quickly. Well, hold on a moment. Sorry. My mom's calling me. I'll be back in a moment. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that had happened during during the during recording, but yeah, it wasn't anything relevant. It wasn't anything special. Let's get back on topic, shall we? Indy merged onto the main roads, the rhythmic hum of the Ford's engine usually acting as a balm for his frayed nerves. However, the silence of the cabin was soon punctured by a low-pitched industrial thrum, the sleek predatory growl of a motorcycle accelerating somewhere behind him. At first, and he didn't think much of it. Marshall College was a bustling hub, and a student or faculty member on a bike wouldn't be an uncommon sight. He kept his eyes on the road ahead, watching the bare March branches claw at the gray sky. But the sound didn't fade. Instead, the rough, aggressive roar of the bike's acceleration smoothed out into a disciplined, steady purr, maintaining a constant distance. Indy's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly, a subconscious instinct honed by years of being hunted. He checked his side mirror. The motorcyclist was gaining ground, approaching with practiced ease from the passenger side. Indy tried to remain indifferent, convinced that the rider would simply lean into the throttle and past him. Instead, the bike slowed, pacing the Ford with uncanny precision. The heavy vibration of the motorcycle's engine began to resonate through Indy's door panel, a constant metallic heartbeat. But the rider was now sitting almost perfectly parallel to his left-hand window. Even though the glass perfectly felt heavy, deliberate, it wasn't the cinematic, middle-of-the-road ambush he might have expected in a pulp novel. It was a calculated shadow, trailing him for the mundane afternoon traffic of Bedford, and it really was as if someone wanted to speak to him. Yet then, Jones heard a voice call out from his left, which broke all his assumptions. "Excuse me, sir. Are you Indiana Jones?" Indy's face turned to pure confusion, skepticism, and very slight shock. Indy looked, and he saw the motorcyclist was speaking to him. The motorcyclist was a young girl, a greaser to be exact. And she said, "I'll keep an eye on the roads for you while we speak, sir. You don't need to worry about getting in a car crash." Indiana gasped, and he asked, "Why are you speaking to me literally on the road?" The girl introduced herself. "I'm Jimena Moctezuma. I'm a greaser. I'm the I'm the daughter of a Mexican archaeologist who has connections with you." Indy replied skeptically, "Well, you have the right person." Indy then quickly transitioned into serious and asked, "Are you with the government? CIA? FBI maybe?" Jimena replied, "What? No. I mean, no trouble with you, sir, but I actually want to inform you of something important." Jimena wore a button-up, clean and slick black long-sleeved leather jacket, dark wash pants, alongside black combat boots. She also wore a collared formal white and long-sleeved shirt under her jacket. Jimena also had a dark blue U.S. Air Force honor guard with silver federal seal and a silver trimming alongside thunderbolt-like motifs. Ximena had a slender, heart-shaped face, natural, messy, black-colored hair hanging down at her neck, alongside bright brownish-colored eyes. Ximena was also physically strong, and her arms and chest were somewhat muscular. Ximena stated, "I managed to get word that you were put on indefinite leave from Marshall College to the possible pro-Soviet sympathy, which I personally believe is definitely not the case. You're better than that." And he stated, "Well, thanks, I guess," for telling Jimena. "But how on earth did you get that information? Did the college also inform you?" Jimena replied, "Well, sort of. I received leaked information from my former professor, Harold Oxley, at the University of Chicago. He was nicknamed Ox, or Oxman. And Oxley was pretty tolerant, and he actually liked that nickname." Indiana exclaimed, "The information was leaked from the college?" Ximena affirmed, "Jones, please, lower your voice. You actually scared me there." Ximena then verified, "Neither me or Ox ever managed to leak the information. He wasn't even able to send this information to anybody but me." Indiana sighed and replied, "Well, good, good." Ximena asked Indiana, "Do you want to go to a local restaurant where we can discuss the letter?" Indiana replied, "Why, yes. There's a local restaurant called Arnie's. Do you want to go there?" Ximena replied, "Yeah, sure. Why not?" Ximena then proceeded to ask, "Have you ever heard about Jung He?" Oh wait, just before we continued, in this Chinese name, the name Jung He would is spelled as Zhenghe. Zhenghe. Yeah, technically it's romanized sometimes as Cheng Ho. So Chengho. Um, but in this Chinese name, it's not pronounced Zhenghe or like Zhenghe. in Chinese, I think it would be pronounced something like Zheng He or Zheng He. Zheng He. No hard R, by the way. Not in like that context, but no hard R's. So even though it's spelled as like Zheng He, it would be pronounced as Zheng He. But back on topic. Indiana responded. The famous Chinese explorer, admiral, statesman, diplomat, and eunuch from the early Han Chinese-led Ming Dynasty? Ximena replied, yes. Ximena briefly explained. The young Li Emperor ordered the construction of the fleet in 1403. The grand project resulted in 7 far-reaching ocean voyages to the coastal territories and islands of the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean. Admiral Zheng He was commissioned to command and lead the fleet for the expeditions. 6 of the voyages occurred during the young Li Emperor's reigned from 1402 to 1424, and the 7th and final voyage occurred during the Zealandian Emperor's reigned from 1425 to 1435. The first 3 voyages reached up to Calicut on India's Malabar coast, while the first 3 voyages reached up to Calicut on India's Malabar coast, while the fourth voyage went as far as Ormuz in the Persian Gulf, also called the Arabian Gulf. During the last 3 voyages, the fleet traveled up to the Arabian Peninsula and the coast of eastern Africa. The Chinese expeditionary fleet was heavily militarized and carried great amounts of treasures, which served to protect Chinese power and wealth to the known old world. They brought back many foreign ambassadors whose kings and rulers were willing to declare themselves tributaries of China. During the course of the voyages, they destroyed Chen Zhuyi's pirate fleet at Palembang and captured the Sinhalese Kota kingdom led by King Alakashvara. Alakashvara. I think I butchered that. The Ming treasure voyages brought back vast amounts of exotic goods, tribute, and foreign ambassadors to China, showcasing Ming power across the Indian Ocean. Zheng He's treasure fleet brought back various industrial materials, luxury goods, valuable resources, and exotic animals. In fact, the treasure fleet infamously brought back zebras, camels, and giraffes, which were considered qilin. Valuable resources included spices like black pepper, medicinal herbs, ivory, sandalwood, ebony, camphor, tin, deer hides, coral, and tortoise shells, and much more. Large quantities of cobalt oxide from Persia were brought back, aiding the Chinese porcelain industry. The treasure ships carried thousands of bolts of fine silk, porcelains, tea, ironworks, and lacquerware to trades with other nations. This was all the while strengthening a tributary system that brought nations into the Chinese sphere of influence. Jimena stated, by the way, if you're curious on what a qilin is, Dr. Jones, it is a legendary hoofed chimerical creature that appears in Chinese mythology and is said to appear. Oh, sorry about that, guys. Sorry. And is said to appear with the imminent arrival or death of a sage or illustrious ruler. Qi Lin are a specific type of the Lin mythological family of one-horned beasts dating all the way back to the 5th century BCE. But Qi Lin also appeared in the mythologies of other Chinese-influenced cultures, the Sinosphere, including Korea and Japan. Ximena stated, I'll explain more once we get to the diner. Are you okay with that? Indiana responded, Why yes, of course. You can explain more about Zhong He and the Ming treasure voyages. Ximena replied, Why thank you. Indiana replied, You're welcome. Indiana stated, Thanks for helping an eye out, for keeping an eye out on the road. I'll be paying attention on the road, but two heads are still better than one. He then told Jimena, Please follow me. I know how to get to Arnie's. The man then remarked, I'll be returning the favor for you, young lady. Well, hold on, guys. I think we'll just be doing one last chapter for now. This is the last one I wrote right now. Chapter 5. From Beijing to Mecca. 40 minutes later, still March 26, 1957, early afternoon. Arnie's Diner was located in Bedford, New York, not Connecticut, New York. Situated on the corner of West Main and another street between Bedford Books and Taylor/Hatter David James. Positions near the Marshall College campus, Arnie served food such as malted milkshakes, burgers, and beers, serving as a popular hangout for both college students and motorcycle riding greasers. Most Saturdays in Bedford, New York, Arnie's Diner was packed with a mix of Marshall College undergrads, high school lettermen, poodle-skirted teenage girls, and townies sporting leather jackets and ducktail haircuts. On this day, the diner was even more packed than usual due to a football game underway in the stadium and a protest march making its way down Main Street. On this very day, Jimena Moctezuma and Indiana Jones went to Arnie's Diner to talk about Harold Oxley and his disappearance after Jimena talked to Indy after he had left Marshall College for the day. Jimena was eating a deluxe burger, a side of French fries, and a glass of water, and on the table was an appetizer of hummus and pita bread. Indiana was eating a double pounder cheeseburger, but also eating fish and chips and a glass of water. Jimena began. Traditional Chinese chronicles, such as the History of Ming, claim the largest ships were approximately 447 feet, or about 137 meters long, and 183 feet, or 56 meters wide. These ships were said to have 9 masts and 4 decks, making them large enough to hold over 500 people. Many modern naval architects and historians argue that a wooden ship of that size would be structurally unstable and unseaworthy due to the flexibility of woods. These experts propose a more modest but still massive length of 200 to 250 feet, or about 61 to 76 meters. This means some scholars believe ships larger than 400 feet might be difficult to build and keep afloat in the 15th century era wooden technology, suggesting the 400-foot ships might have only been used in calmer inland waters like the Yangtze River rather than open ocean voyages. Ximena asked, Have you ever heard of the Santa Maria, Dr. Jones? Jones replied, The Santa Maria was one of the ships of the Italian explorer and navigator Christopher Columbus on his first voyage in 1492. It was the biggest of the three ships. The Santa Maria was approximately 85 to 90 feet long, making the treasure ships over 4 to 5 times longer. Admiral Jung Ho had over 200 to 300 treasure ships, compared to Columbus's mere 3 ships on his first voyage. The Ming treasure ship, in fact, dwarfed over European ships of the era. And remember, the treasure ship fleet began over 97 years before Columbus ever stepped foot in the Caribbean islands. Jimena told Jones, some years after the death of the young Li emperor, Confucius influenced ministers gained power and argued that the voyages brought little benefit and fostered dangerous foreign influence. Resources were needed to combat rising threats from the post-Yuan Northern Mongols and other Central Asian groups, making the navy a low priority. The voyages were managed by court eunuchs. Dismantling the fleet was a way for the civil government bureaucracy to reduce the influence of their political rivals. China was largely self-sufficient, and officials sought to prevent private trade and control foreign trade. So, following the final voyage in 1433, the fleet was decommissioned. The ships were left to decay or were ordered to be burned. Ximena stated, but for context, leading up to the Ming treasure fleets, on July 17, 1404, in Ming China, Zhu Di, the Prince of Yan, ascended the throne as the young Li Emperor. He inherited a powerful navy from his father, the Hongwu Emperor, the founding emperor of the Ming Dynasty, who overthrew the Mongol-led Yuan Dynasty in the Red Turban Rebellion. The young Li Emperor further developed it as an instrument for its expansive overseas policies. The Taizong Shilu contains 24 short entries for the imperial orders for shipbuilding, with figures pointing to at least 4,868 ships from 1403 to 1419. Over the course of 1403, Fujian, Jiangxi, Zhejiang, and Huangang's provincial governments, as well as Nanjing, Suzhou, and other cities' military garrisons were ordered to begin constructing ships. Under the reign of the young Li Emperor, Ming China underwent materialistic expansionism, with ventures such as the treasure voyages. In 1403, he issued an imperial order to start the immense construction project of the treasure. Ximena explained, now, Zhong He was a high-ranking loyal eunuch and was of Muslim Hui Chinese origin from China's Yunnan province. Zhong He was considered the ideal leader to command such high-stakes, long-distance missions. Zhong He led 7 expeditions with his fleet containing hundreds of ships, some among the largest wooden vessels in history, serving as a great diplomatic and military show of strength. Zhong He died in 1433, during or immediately after his 7th and final voyage, likely in Calicut, India, and was reportedly buried at sea. Following his death, the Ming Dynasty stopped the treasure voyages, destroyed the fleet's records, and adopted an isolationist policy, ending China's era of maritime exploration. Ximena cleared her voice before stating, Zhonghe also visited Indonesia, specifically Java and Sumatra, during his first voyage, 1405 to 1407, and in several subsequent expeditions, he frequently stopped in Palembang, Sumatra, and Java to combat piracy and manage regional relationships. With the Battle of Palembang of 1407 and Palembang, Sumatra, this occurred on the return trip of Admiral Zheng's voyage against Chinese pirates led by pirate leader Chen Zuyi. This was a major naval battle, and it resulted in the Ming victory, and resulted in the defeat of Chen Zhuyi, who was captured and sent to China for execution. Throughout his voyages, Java and Sumatra served as vital logistics hub, and that's where Mr. Oxley's letter will come in. Alright, hold on, we're almost there. Indiana asked, "Oh really? How is it, Jimena?" Jimena began. Well, Zhonghe encountered major storms, including at least one hurricane or severe tropical storm during his voyages through Southeast Asia and the Indian Ocean, including the Indonesian archipelago. During his voyage to India, which involved passing through the Strait of Malacca near Indonesia, his fleet encountered a ferocious hurricane. In the midst of the storm, as the ships were in danger of capsizing, a quote, divine light, possibly an example of Saint Elmo's fire, was seen shining at the masthead, which Zhonghe interpreted as a protective sign from the goddess Tian Fei in Chinese folk religions like Taoism and Chinese Buddhism. Ximena stated, "Now Oxley was in Tibet, where Oxley sent a letter to my mother, Nima Moctezuma, a Mexican pre-Columbian archaeologist." Ximena asked, "She is apparently an ex-colleague of yours. Is that true, Indiana?" Indy responded, "Yes, we worked together at pre-European archaeological sites across Latin America, and especially in Mexico and Peru, in the early to mid-20th centuries. We actually reunited briefly in Cancun in 1936. However, I haven't really talked to her since Cancun occurred." Ximena replied, "Well, now's your chance. You'll be able to reunite with her once more." Ximena then continued, Now Ximena Moctezuma received Oxley's letter from Tibet earlier this year in 57. In the letter, Oxley reported that he found a legendary crystal skull and that he was about to return to its place of origin, Zealandia. The letter alarmed Marion because, not Marion, sorry. Oh, sorry, typo. Ximena, not Marion, because its contents made her believe that Oxley had lost his mind. She left for Tibet to care for him, but when she arrived there, she was captured by Soviet special forces and Oxley in their custody. Shortly before he was captured by the Soviets, Oxley had written a second letter, but in the cryptic code, he passed this letter to Ximena, and the Soviets let her escape, just long enough to forward that letter, together with a letter of her own, to her biological daughter, which is me, urging me to forward it to you. Ximena showcased the envelope. The envelope looked like a regular envelope with an address right in saying, Ximena Moctezuma, 210 North, Dearborn Street, Chicago, Illinois, USA. With the envelope being covered in stamps, Indy asked, "Do you have all 3 letters, or is it just the letter from Ox and your mother?" "I wasn't trying to sound rude, though." Ximena replied, "Well, you're completely fine. And as for the envelope, it only has the second letter from Oxman himself and Nima. Jimena stated, apparently she and Oxley were captured by a Colonel Ivanov? I'm not sure how to say it. Indiana asked himself. Ivanov. Ivanov? Ivanov. 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 Indy's face turned pale, and his heart began to race aggressively as he realized. Ivanov. Quietly. Jimena asked, apologies? Indiana replied, I think you were trying to say Ivanov, as in Colonel Etrakina Ivanov. She's a Soviet military commander, psychic and combatant from Soviet Ukraine. She abducted your mother and Mr. Oxley while they were in Tibet. Indiana asked to verify. You happen to be aware of the run-in I had with the Soviets in Nevada? Jimena replied, why, yes. Oxley managed to inform me about it. Indiana stated, well, that Ivanov woman was the same commander who led the Soviet convoy I encountered while at Area 52. They were looking for mummified remains of an Egyptian princess connected to the interdimensional omniverse and Platonism. Indiana stated, that crystalline skull your former professor found has to do with this Zealandia location. And the Soviets were searching for the princess's bodily remains, as she had some relation with interdimensionalism during her era. Oh wait, hold on. In the fourth dynasty, in the 27th century BCE, you stated Zealandia was a sunken underwater civilization. Plato, who wrote the story of Atlantis in his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, claimed his ancestor, the statesman Solon, heard the story from the two Egyptian priests, who supposedly documented the story from ancient obelisks centuries before Solon's time. Indiana continued, this Zealandia place must have some connection to the princess and his crystalline skull from Zealandia. Alright, we'll stop here for today.